He called it a mission to civilize Africa. But behind the mask of charity, he built one of the most brutal killing machines the world has ever seen. His name was King Leopold II of Belgium, and his empire was not made of stone or steel. It was built from blood, ivory, and rubber. This is the forgotten story of the man who killed over 10 million Africans and how the world stayed silent. It began in the late 19th century, during what historians call the Scramble for Africa. Europe was hungry for land, power, and resources. Britain, France, Portugal, and Germany were dividing the continent like hunters sharing meat. But one man, King Leopold II of Belgium, wanted more than just a piece of Africa. He wanted an entire kingdom for himself. Leopold ruled a small European nation, Belgium, which was powerful in ambition but weak in territory. He envied other empires and dreamed of his name written in gold beside conquerors and kings. But there was one problem. Belgium had no colonies. So he decided to get one for himself. He knew Europe would never allow him to simply claim a country. So he disguised his plan with a lie, a story so clever it fooled the world. He told Europe he wanted to help Africa, that he wanted to bring civilization, end the slave trade, and spread Christianity. To the world, he was a humanitarian king, a savior of Africa. But in secret, he wanted to turn an entire African nation into his personal gold mine. The land he chose was called the Congo, a vast green paradise in Central Africa, filled with forests, rivers, elephants, and millions of people. To Europeans, it was a mysterious, untouched land. To Leopold, it was a treasure chest waiting to be opened. This is Voices of the Forgotten, where Africa's buried truths rise again. In 1885, after months of manipulation, Leopold attended the Berlin Conference, a meeting where European powers literally drew lines across Africa, deciding who would own which lands. Leopold stood there, smiling, pretending to be a man of peace. He told them he wanted the Congo as a free state, a neutral zone for trade, peace, and progress. The other European leaders, thinking he was sincere, agreed. They signed documents giving the Congo Free State to Leopold, not to Belgium, not to Europe, but to him personally. The Congo became his private property, 76 times larger than Belgium. And with that, his mask began to fall. Once Leopold secured the land, he sent in his agents, soldiers, explorers, and mercenaries to take control. He called them the Force Publique, but they were not peacekeepers, they were killers. Their orders were clear: make the people of the Congo work for the king, or make them suffer. At first, Leopold's men forced villagers to collect ivory, taken from elephants that roamed the forests. But then a world changed. The Industrial Revolution began to hunger for something new: rubber. Rubber became gold. It was needed for tires, machines, and factories, and Congo's forests were full of it. Leopold saw his chance. He ordered his soldiers to extract as much rubber as possible, no matter the cost. Villages were turned into rubber camps. Men, women, and children were forced to climb trees, tap vines, and scrape rubber until their hands bled. If a man refused or failed to bring enough, soldiers would take his wife, his child, or worse. To make sure every bullet was accounted for, Leopold's officers demanded proof of every kill. Each soldier who shot a villager had to cut off their hand and bring it back as evidence. Sometimes, when bullets were low, they cut off hands from the living just to prove they had obeyed orders. In the heart of the jungle, piles of severed hands began to appear. Mountains of flesh, proof of loyalty to the king. Entire villages vanished. Children were mutilated to send messages. Women were taken hostage until their husbands met the rubber quota.
The Congo became a land of screams, a kingdom of death built on lies. For years, the world believed Leopold's fairy tale, that the Congo Free State was a beacon of progress. Missionaries and explorers sent back glowing reports, many of them bribed or silenced. But truth has a way of escaping cages. One day, a man named George Washington Williams, an African-American journalist, traveled to the Congo. He expected to find a land of peace. What he found instead was horror beyond imagination. He saw bodies hanging from trees, villages burned to ash, people whipped until their skin peeled away. When he returned, he wrote an open letter to King Leopold, accusing him of crimes against humanity, long before the term even existed. William's words shook the world, but they were only the beginning. Hi, thank you for watching up to this point. If you love African mystery history, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll be the first to see our next story. Now, let's continue. Then came Edmund Dean Morel, a British shipping clerk. He noticed something strange. Ships leaving Belgium for the Congo were full of guns and chains, while ships returning were loaded with rubber and ivory. He realized the truth. The Congo was not a free state. It was a slave empire. Morel joined forces with a missionary named Roger Casement, and together they launched a global campaign. For the first time, the world began to see Leopold not as a humanitarian, but as a monster. The truth spread like wildfire. Photographs began to appear. Shocking, brutal images of mutilated children and villages destroyed. One picture showed a father staring blankly at the severed hand and foot of his 5-year-old daughter. That image alone broke hearts across Europe. Newspapers called it the atrocities of the Congo. Writers, pastors, and activists demanded answers. Mark Twain even wrote a book called King Leopold's Soliloquy, mocking the king's hypocrisy. But while the world debated, millions continued to die. It's estimated that between 10 to 15 million Congolese people were killed through murder, starvation, exhaustion, and disease, all in the name of profit. Entire tribes disappeared. Languages vanished.
The land that once overflowed with life became a graveyard. And through it all, Leopold sat in his royal palace, collecting wealth worth billions in today's money, more than any European monarch of his time. He built grand buildings in Belgium, museums, palaces, monuments, all paid for with African blood. By the early 1900s, the outcry could no longer be ignored. Public pressure grew so intense that even Belgium's parliament demanded answers. Finally, in 1908, after over 20 years of terror, the Belgian government forced Leopold to surrender the Congo Free State. But it wasn't justice. He was not punished. He was paid. The Belgian state bought the Congo from him, compensating the man who had killed millions. And when he died a year later, in 1909, crowds cheered outside his funeral, not in sorrow, but in anger. They cursed his name as his coffin passed. For them, he was not a king. He was a murderer. Yet even then, Belgium tried to clean his image. Textbooks called him a visionary, a builder of cities. For decades, the horror of the Congo was buried beneath lies and silence. Today, the Congo remains one of the richest lands on Earth, overflowing with gold, diamonds, oil, and cobalt. Yet its people still suffer. Its forests still bleed. Its history still echoes with Leopold's ghost. What Leopold started did not end with him. He showed the world how easy it was to exploit Africa, and others followed. Colonialism spread deeper. Borders were redrawn, tribes divided, and entire nations were built on pain. 10 million lives erased, and most of the world never learned their names. King Leopold II never held a sword, never led an army into battle, yet he killed more people than many of history's worst tyrants. His weapon was greed. His excuse was civilization. And his victims were Africans whose only crime was living on land that others desired. This is not just history, it is a mirror. Because even today, Africa's wealth is still being taken. Foreign powers still extract minerals, diamonds, and oil, while the people remain poor. Modern corporations do what kings once did and call it progress. When we forget stories like Leopold's, it makes it easier for new ones to happen. When we erase the past, we open the door to another age of chains, invisible ones, made not of iron, but of dependence and deceit. He said he came to save Africa. He said he came to bring light. But when he left, the land was darker than ever before. King Leopold II, the man who killed 10 million Africans, died with clean hands, but a soul drenched in blood. And today, as the Congo struggles to rise again, the world must remember that the price of silence is always paid in lives. Because history is not just about the past, it is a warning, and this warning must never be forgotten. This is Voices of the Forgotten. And that is the truth history tried to forget.